Today on With the First Pick, with the college all-star games, the combine, and most of the pro days behind us, all that's left is the waiting. And to help you pass the time, we're firing up the old mock draft machine for a full first-round mock draft, all 32 picks. That is former Titans GM Ran Carthon. I'm Ryan Wilson. And Ran, we have exactly 22 days until the 2025 NFL Draft. How are you doing, my man?
Man, I'm doing great, man. It's funny to hear you say 22 days. Last time we spoke, it was 30, and the time is just going on. Like I always say, man, time waits for no man. So here we are.
All right, man, let's give the people what they want. Let's do this mock draft, all 32 picks. And last Monday, you mentioned 30 days ago, we were at Cam Ward's Pro Day. This Friday, we will be at Shedeur Sanders' Pro Day. And those are two names to know because right at the top, Titans are taking Cam Ward. Not going to overcomplicate it. Had a fantastic Pro Day. You had an opportunity to talk with him, and that's an interview you should check out if you haven't seen it yet on CBSSports.com. Go to YouTube/NFL on CBS and find it there. So done and done. Titans get a quarterback. Let's go to number 2, though, because things get interesting suddenly right here. Not a deep quarterback class at the top. Okay. Here we go. This is like declaration day for the high school kids. What are we doing at number 2, Ran?
At number 2, like you said, we talked about Cam Ward, and we're at that Pro Day and headed to see Shedeur Pro Day this weekend. So I'm taking Shedeur Sanders at number 2 for the Cleveland Browns.
All right, just so we're clear, we're alternating picks. I don't know if you have 16 hats over there, but I'm interested to see how this thing goes.
I'm pretty close. Pretty close.
All right, man. Well, that's cool. I'm a bald guy with no hat on, and you got 16 hats. You could have shared one for me. All right. Next up at number 3, the New York City Football Giants. Look, they need a quarterback. We've talked about that. They do have Russ Wilson. They do have Jameis Winston. They do have Tommy Cutlets, Tommy DeVito. I'm taking the number 1 player on my big board, and that big board came out last week if you're dying to see it on CBSSports.com. I'm taking Travis Hunter, a young man we will also see on Friday in Boulder, Colorado. We'll see if he works out. I think you've talked about this before on the podcast, Rand. He doesn't need to work out. All you got to do is watch the tape, the 120 snaps he's played every single week for Colorado to understand what type of athlete he is. And I think he gives you 2 for 1 in New York, although I think you have to be careful with how much you use him at the next level because of his slight frame in terms of just taking a ton of hits. And, even if he was 285, you don't want anyone playing 120 snaps a game. But he is automatically upgraded that secondary and the wide receiver room in New York. So I'm doing that at number 3. You're next on the board at number 4. We're the New England Patriots. What are they doing at number 4, Red?
At number 4, we're going to take LSU tackle Will Campbell. And so where I went with this pick is solves your left tackle problem. You just signed Morgan Moses to be your starting right tackle to a multi-year deal. Now you add a young Will Campbell. Vidarian Lowe, who's been over there at left tackle, is headed towards free agency. And so this gives you a cornerstone left tackle that will come in from day one, be your starter, and give you 10 years of good, solid production at that position and help keep your first-round pick, Drake May, up and allow him to get the ball downfield to a guy you just signed, Stephon Diggs. So I like this pick for them to take the left tackle, Will Campbell, out of LSU.
I'm sure you have experience with this, Rand, as a GM who's had to be on the clock and hear the fans either be excited or not so excited. When Patriots fans say, hey, man, Abdul Carter's sitting right there. What are you doing? Will Campbell has short arms. What's your answer to that?
Well, for me personally, with this position, again, you've invested so much into your offense. And if you look at a Mike Vrabel defense, Mike Vrabel is able to mask deficiencies that you may have on the perimeter or wherever on defense. This position, the left tackle position, is a premium position in this league. It's one of the higher paid positions in this league. And if you've invested a top 5 pick in your quarterback, why not invest another top 5 pick in keeping him upright so you can have him on the field for all 17 games and potentially longer?
Exactly. I think that's the right answer. And the other thing that you and I talked about this before, short arms is all relative, and Will Campbell's been starting in the SEC since freshman year, so he didn't suddenly become a terrible football player just because of what the yardstick said, correct?
And I will say this, going back to Coach Vrabel's days of a player in New England, their starting left tackle was Matt Light. And Matt Light played 10 years for the Patriots. He's in the Patriots Hall of Fame, and if I'm correct, I believe his arm length was 33 and a half, and Will Campbell measured in at a 33 at his pro day. So like you said, he's played in the SEC against all these top rushers that we love throughout day 1 and day 2 of this draft, and he had no problem blocking them. I don't see that changing in the National Football League.
Yeah, I think the theme of this mock draft and the theme for the next 22 days for fans, media, even folks in the league, don't overthink it. Will Campbell protects Drake May, and you go from there. All right, next up, pick number 5. And the Jacksonville Jaguars and the millions of mock drafts that I've done. And we hope to get you up to 1 million, Ram, because I know you love mock drafts. Mason Graham is usually the guy here. But my guy, Abdul Carter, who I just mentioned, is sitting right here. And I'm taking him. I don't care that we have Josh Hines-Allen. The more the merrier. You talk about the importance of pass rush. Do you agree with the sentiment that you can never have enough edge rushers as well?
Oh, absolutely. And especially now in the AFC South, where things are opened up and they're going to be throwing the ball around the yard, you better have a plethora of guys that's going to be able to apply that pressure off the edge. Now, if you want to speak to it a little bit different from a GM and from a front office standpoint, you just paid Josh Allen Hines and to a long-term deal. You also took a guy in the first round, number 1 overall, who's coming up on a contract here pretty soon. So it gives you a situation where you don't have to overcommit to these veteran guys because you have a young guy in the hopper. But again, you have a young guy that can apply pressure off the edge, and they're going to be creative in how they move these guys around, get all these guys on the field at the same time. Kind of reminds me a little bit of when we had in San Francisco all those guys coming off the edge, and we were able to put D forward in a spinner type role. Because what you forget about Abdul Carter is that he played off the ball his previous 2 years at Penn State. So him playing off the edge is fairly new. And so for him, he has that versatility, and you could be creative with packages to get all 3 of those guys on the field at the same time.
And that's a great point for if there's any pushback with, well, you already have Travon Walker, you already have Josh Hines-Allen, why do we need Abdul Carter? Well, Travon Walker's contract's going to be coming up, and you have to have contingency plans. And as a fan, you're thinking the next game, the next season. As a GM, you have to take the larger view. And also, the other thing we've talked about is when you set your board as an NFL team, you're not changing your mind at the last minute. You have Abdul Carter ranked ahead of Mason Graham. So if Abdul Carter's there, you take him and you move on and you get ready for your next draft pick. So I ain't losing any sleep over that.
And let's not forget, we are talking about a new regime, a new head coach, and a first-time GM. So when they're picking in the top 5, they're going to want to go with the most surefire pick that they can make for their first pick. And I don't think it gets any more surefire than Abdul Carter.
That's a great point. All right, things get a little spicy here at number 6. I don't know if you have a hat or not. He got a hat. Look at this. All right, here's the thing, man. They need wide receiver help, the Las Vegas Raiders do. Certainly they're taking Tedoroa McMillan, correct?
Wrong. We're going to go with it's been pretty consistent around the mock draft world, but this is a great landing spot for Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty. If you talk about what Pete Carroll wants to do offensively, this guy fits that bill. He gives you a bell cow runner that can just churn out tough yards. And as you know, playing in this AFC West with the Chargers offense and with Kansas City's offense, you got to have a running game to keep these guys off the field and shorten the game for you. And Ashton Jeanty gives you that. Pete Carroll, when he came into Seattle, he had Marshawn Lynch. We know what beast mode was. And then after they moved on from Marshawn, they had a little bit of a lull, and that was until they got Kenneth Walker. And then that brought them back going again. And so now you trade for Geno Smith. And I look back and I looked at the numbers, and under Pete Carroll in 22 and 23, Geno Smith was 8th in the league in play action passes in 22 and 12th in the league in 23. And that was because he had the strong running game behind Kenneth Walker. And if you look at Ashton Jeanty's fit, he's gonna put up some tough carries. He's gonna be a potential 250 to 300 carry a year guy for them and be able to shorten those games for those guys in the AFC West. So I like Ashton Jeanty here at 6.
Yeah, and you might say, well, he didn't catch a bunch of passes in 24. Go back and look at 23. He was an important part of that pass game. The last thing I'll ask him before we take a break, Rand, and I asked Ashton this at the Combine, do you care that he might be 6'5", 5'7"?
No, it just gives him space to hide behind these big offensive linemen. And if you know a Raiders offensive line is big and massive.
Okay, fair enough. And he said to me, not one single NFL team asked me about that, just you. So I said, all right, my bad. We'll move on. So no one cares about
picking on people, short. Ryan.
As a short guy, man, I'm trying to find someone to join my group. All right, let's take a quick break. Pick 1 through 6 in the books, and when we come back, what are the old New York Jets going to do at 7? We'll talk about that right after this. Welcome back to With the First Pick here on CBS Sports Network. That's Ran Carthon. I'm Ryan Wilson. Picks 1 through 6 in the books. Ran. Next up at pick 7, the New York Jets. And I'm going to use your team needs chart that you so kindly shared with me. At top of the list for the New York Jets, offensive line. And that's why I'm taking my guy, right tackle Armand Membu out of Missouri. And I love him more than you love him. I want to hear your thoughts on this. He literally just turned 21, so happy birthday to Armand. He was, what was he? He was 6'3" and change at the Senior Bowl. He's grown to 6'4" now at his pro day. His arms are plenty long at 33 and a half. And I said he's 21 years old. Is this too rich for you? Because they need help at right tackle to go with last year's first-round pick, Olaf Ashton.
Yeah, it's a little too rich for me. I think there's still some development to be had there. You could throw out the measurables. I mean, the guy's tape speaks for itself. But we're talking about a still raw prospect. I think he's plenty athletic. I think he has plenty twitch in his body. But there are a lot of technical things that I think he still needs to fix. You know, his hand use. You know, being able to be an independent puncher, but also not clamp on the outside as much. And so those are some of the things I saw when I watched him. I like him. I just think 7 is a little too high, you know, for a guy, because if you're taking a guy at 7, you want them to come in and plug and play. Now, I know there's going to be a level of fans saying, hey, you took an offensive lineman at 7 last year and switched his position. But again, we're talking about a big, massive man that had plenty of length, plenty of strength, plenty of athleticism. I like Armand, and I think he will start in this league at right tackle. I just think 7's a little rich for me.
Okay. You taking him top 32? You feel comfortable with that?
Yes, I would definitely take him in top 32. And as we were going through this exercise, you actually, when you took him at 7, you kind of killed some of my plans for some of the teams we're picking later in the draft. However, you know, I think 7 was a little too rich. Again, for me, the way I was raised in this league, you know, those top 10 picks, you want about as surefire as you could get.
Yeah. No, fair enough. That's right. And a lot of this, you're gambling on upside. And, you know, then it comes down to coaching and everything else around him. The good news is I can't get fired for making this mock draft, I don't think. So I think I might be all right. Next up, Carolina Panthers at 8. And Teddy McMillan's still sitting there. So certainly you took a wide receiver here. Right, Rand?
I did not. And for once, I don't have a hat for this one, so you got me on this one. I guess my friends in Carolina didn't like me as much. But here I'm taking Jalen Walker. Again, how we talked about Abdul Carter and his versatility, being able to line her all over the place so the defense confuse people, create those mismatches. This is where you see him. As you see on the stats, he had 11 TFLs, you know, last year. And when you talk about being shot out of a cannon, this guy and his short area explosiveness is next level. And I think he's a great fit for Coach Ejiro Evero in his defense. Having been around Ejiro when we were at the Rams, he loves versatility. He loves being able to have chess pieces to move all around and create havoc. And I think this guy fits the bill for that.
Yeah, good luck finding someone more athletic and freakishly athletic and twitched up than Jalen Walker. He's 6'1", 243, I think is what he came in. I don't care about any of that. You can just line him up anywhere and let him get after it. And that showed up week in and week out at Georgia, playing in the best conference in football in the SEC. Next up, the New Orleans Saints are at 9. And I took a lot of pride in this mock draft because I know I took some of your guys right before you wanted to go off the board. So this is my OT1, Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. He's still here. I'm taking him. Last year they took Tully Fuaga, moved him from the right side to the left side. Trevor Penning had struggled as a former first-round pick out of Northern Iowa. He's on the right side now. So I think you can decide what to do with Kelvin and Tully in terms of where you line them up. But now you have 2 bookend tackles to help that Kellen Moore offense in year 1. And whether they look to get a quarterback later or not, it's going to be Derek Carr's offense to start. And Kelvin Banks Jr. is I thought he was one of the best athletes at the offensive line in this draft class. Things he could work on for sure, but I think right at 9 feels about the right spot for him to come off the board. Number 10.
No,
Chicago Bears on the clock. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say with Kelvin, and you go look at the history of the New Orleans Saints, they have always done a very good job of drafting a year ahead of a need. And so this wouldn't be foreign to them to have plenty of offensive linemen and not being able to plug and play. You can go all the way back, to the very beginning days of Teron Armstead when they first drafted him. And so they've done this strategically throughout their time at various positions, and this fits the bill. I know that Fuaga played really well for them at left tackle, and they love the development of him over there. So this wouldn't be a problem. It'll be a first world problem for them to have two tackles that they have to figure out who's going to play on what side.
Speaking of first world problems, the Bears pick, this just falls into their lap. They weren't necessarily looking to get a defensive tackle. There's the hat.
Back in the hat game.
Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson. What are we doing, Rand, at number 10?
So this, for me, is a best player available pick. You talked about being available here, but I went Mason Graham at this pick. This is a best player available pick. You're talking about a defense that has wreaked havoc up front. This guy adds to that. They signed Grady Jarrett this offseason, who's aging and who has dealt with some injuries now. They signed him to a multi-year deal, but they can get out of this deal in 2027. And so having a young guy like this, a disruptive force in the middle versus the run and versus the pass, just continues to add for them up front. Personally, in a perfect world, I think the perfect world fit for them would be Kelvin Banks if he was sitting here as their starting left tackle. Last year when Texas played Vanderbilt, their GM and their assistant GM were both at that game. And then this guy will be a good Braxton Jones replacement. If you can remember, Braxton Jones fractured his ankle late last season. I think he's 6 days removed now from being out of his walking boot, but he will also be a free agent at the end of the season. And so in order to keep from having to pay a guy $20+ million, a year at that left tackle position, in a perfect world, if Kelvin Banks was here, I think they would gladly run the card up and have their left tackle moving forward.
Yeah, Mason Graham is not a bad consolation prize, however. All right, pick 11. Your former organization, the San Francisco 49ers, they were very busy in free agency, mostly sending guys out the door. We're going to help them restock the secondary. Love Diamador Lenore, love Renardo Green after his rookie season, but they need some help at cornerback. In addition to those two guys, and I went with Jahdae Barron, cornerback / slot / safety / off-ball linebacker. If you want to play him there, he can line up anywhere. I ran a 4.39 at the combine. He plays pretty fast. He has ball skills. He knows everyone's position on defense. He's going to be one of the smartest guys on your defense, and I think he'll come in right away and have an opportunity for a lot of playing time because of those ball skills, because of how smart he is. And he had a great season for Texas, and now he ends up being one of the first defensive backs off the board when you start with Travis Hunter as an athlete, basically cornerback / wide receiver. All right, pick 12 here. Oh, yeah. What do you want to say about Jahdae?
No, what I'll say about Jahdae and his fit with the 49ers is, like you said, the versatility and being able to play nickel. If you remember, Robert Saleh's coming back as a defensive coordinator, and one of those key positions in his defense is the nickel. Now, Diamador Lenore played in there last year, but they just paid him, a top-of-the-market deal, and so I'm pretty sure they're going to want to see him more on the outside. So having Jahdae in there to play nickel for him, you play nickel 60 to 63% of the time now anyway. It becomes your base defense, especially in that division. And so this is a really good pick for them, a guy that can play outside, play inside, and could potentially play safety for him as well.
Absolutely. I love his game. I love talking to him. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys. And they have not done a lot this offseason, much to the chagrin of Cowboys fans. So I feel like this is a home run pick. What are the Dallas Cowboys doing, Rand?
Well, you heard Stephen Jones speak at owners' meetings this week and said that they would love to have an explosive number 2, opposite of CeeDee Lamb. And you've mentioned him before, and this is where Ted McMillan, he falls to you here at 12, which I think they take the pick. Big weapon, opposite of CeeDee, a guy that can win in those contested 50-50 areas and give them a big presence in the red zone that I think will help Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and create more explosive plays in that offense.
Finally comes off the board here, and this actually feels maybe closer to where he ends up getting drafted, right? Maybe just in the 10 to 15 range. I know it's popular, and I mentioned it with the Las Vegas Raiders at 6, but as you pointed out, Ashton Jeanty actually probably provides a little bit more punch to an offense as the ability to run the ball, and he can also catch the ball. And you got to have someone to be able to throw him the ball. I think Geno Smith would obviously benefit from Ted McMillan, but I think Dak Prescott would, and more importantly, probably CeeDee Lamb. So I love this pick here. I love the fit. We are 12 picks in, Rand, And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the Miami Dolphins are going to be on the clock at 13. And I have that pick, and I will let you know what that pick is right after the break. Welcome back to With the First Pick here on CBS Sports Network, going through an entire first-round mock draft. That's Ran Carthon. I'm Ryan Wilson. Ran, we are up to pick 13, where the Miami Dolphins currently find themselves. And the theme of this show has been don't overthink it. So I am getting offensive line help for Tua Tagovailoa. I'm taking Tyler Booker, who is a grown man in every sense of the word. Didn't have a great pre-draft workout. Do not care. I saw him play in the SEC, and he was dominant. Liam Eichenberg has 1 year left on his deal in Miami at the left guard position. You can put Tyler Booker in on day one, and I think feel good about it for the next decade. Any complaints with that?
None. I mean, like you said, it helps Tua. And the best thing for a guy like Tua, who's shorter, on the shorter end of being a quarterback, is to shore up that middle, right? And allow him to be able to step into throws. And the number one thing you ever hear people talk about, the first thing they talk about with Tyler Booker is how strong he is. And so a guy to being able to set a firm pocket and secure that pocket will allow Tua to step up and make those throws down the field.
Absolutely. They just signed James Daniel at right guard, so they're moving in the right direction there. Next up, pick 14. It sounds like there might be a competition, as you put your hat on, between Anthony Richardson, your Gator, and Daniel Jones. I don't think there should be, but that's where we are in that journey. What are you going to do to help whoever the quarterback ends up being in Indianapolis?
Well, they'll tell you the best friend to a quarterback is a running game and a safety valve underneath. And with this pick, I'm going to take Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. A big man that has unique ball skills. He has unique ability all around. You saw the way Penn State used him, put him at quarterback, moved him around, did some wildcat things. I don't foresee Shane Steichen using him that way, but just giving them a big safety valve underneath for these quarterbacks to give them some short and easy completions and a guy that can make, plays down the field. If you go back to the early days of the Colts and don't want to sound like an old head and say back in my day, Peyton Manning had a lot of weapons around him. But his best friends, and when he got in trouble, he was looking for guys like Dallas Clark and Marcus Pollard. And now this would give, Indy that feel again and give them a big, viable tight end to help these young quarterbacks out.
I'm glad you mentioned that Peyton Manning, those Peyton Manning teams of which you were a part of. Our former buddy, Rick Spielman, hates my he's still our buddy, our former colleague here. He hates my comps. So I mentioned that because tell me what you think of this, because you saw this player up close and personal. Any similarities between Dallas Clark and Tyler Warren?
I'd say no, other than the number 44. Dallas was a unique player. Dallas was, by tight end standards, he was a little undersized, right? So we're looking at 6'2", maybe 235. Dallas could have played some fullback, if needed. But I think there's a little bit of difference. I think Dallas was a little better athlete, probably had better long speed, but Tyler is bigger, was probably a better inline blocker, and maybe a little bit more versatile when you think about all the things offensively you could do with him. So I'm on your side, Rick, when you see this.
Rand just said straight up no similarities. So I'm starting to think that I might need to work on my comps. All right, fair enough. Next up, pick 15. Atlanta Falcons are on the clock, and I feel like we've been having this conversation for 5 or 6 or 7 years, Rand. The Falcons need to get an edge rush help. They've tried. They drafted Braylon Trice last year in the second round. Day 2 at least, maybe third round. Either way, he got hurt before the season, so he didn't get an opportunity to play. He'll be healthy this time around, so hopefully he can stay healthy. They signed Leonard Floyd. I'm still going to keep giving guys Raheem Morris until they get it right along that front four. And I'm taking Mykel Williams out of Georgia. We talked to him at the Combine, and quiet kid, and he said, look, I am still scratching the surface on who I can become physically as a football player. And there's a lot to like when he is healthy. He reminds me a little bit of Travon Walker coming out. The difference is that he doesn't have the pressure of potentially being the first overall pick. So he can perhaps fly under the radar as a middle of the first round guy, get comfortable in what they're asking him to do in Atlanta, and then just pin his ears back and get after it. Are you a Mykel Williams fan?
I do. I really like him. I like his versatility, and I'm not so sure because of the 34 system that Atlanta runs. I know he may start his career as an outside backer, but I'm not so sure that he won't end up being a defensive end one day and being a 5 technique just because of his size and his length. And I still think he has room to grow into his body to add another 10 to 15 pounds. But you talk about a long, explosive, and disruptive guy. His numbers may not say that he's a sack artist, but he can get that quarterback off his platform and off of spots and allowing other guys to come in and clean it up. But he was very disruptive for Georgia last year.
Yeah, that's a good point about where he may end up playing. I think he was 265 during the pre-draft process, so he can add 10 to 15, get up to 280, and then you're looking like you are a 5 technique playing over the tackle. All right, pick 16. We're halfway through this thing. Arizona Cardinals are on the clock, and this young man was the number 1 player on my big board coming out of the summer, and then he struggled with injuries in the fall. Who do you got?
I got Will Johnson. First of all, no hat. Thanks, friends in Arizona. But I like Will Johnson. I like his fit here. You're talking about a tall corner, which is what Jonathan Gannon likes in his system, guys that can get body to body on some of these receivers. And he has ball skills. Last year, they took Max Melton in the second round, signed Sean Murphy-Bunting as a free agent. And Sean, they can get out of his deal after this upcoming season. And so having a young guy with the size, with the length, and the willingness to come up and tackle it off the edge is kind of a really good fit for Jonathan Gannon's system. So I went with Will Johnson right here at 16. Going back to our previous conversation where we were talking about, you stealing players, from me early, this would be a good spot for Mimbu right here as well if he was here to give them, because they drafted Paris Johnson in 23, played him at right tackle early, then kicked him over to left. And then Jonah Williams is there now. Jonah struggled through, injuries throughout his entire career. And I think he's set to become a free agent after this season. So having a young guy like Mimbu, if he was here, I could see that Mimbu pick taking precedence here over the corner. But for our sake and for you stealing and being a thief and taking all my guys early, I went with Will Johnson right here.
I made that Mimbu pick for Dallas Clark. Me and him are in this together. Let me ask you this about Will. Let me ask you this about Will Johnson. Had the turf toe that curtailed the second half of the season, had the hamstring during the pre-draft process, so we have not seen him run yet at any point. Maybe he does. What if he runs a 4.65? And I'm not saying he will, but there's concern that he might be slower than perhaps teams would like him to be. So what if he runs a 4.60, 4.65? Does that change your opinion when you're having these conversations?
It will factor in, but that, from there you can continue to do the defense. Do the research. I remember years ago in San Fran when we drafted Dre Greenlaw, and I think he may have ran a 4.7 40 at either his pro day or the combine. But you go back and you pull the school's GPS numbers, and they showed him getting over 21 and hitting 22 sometimes. So you just got to continue to do your research in those situations to see what these guys' true speeds are.
And that's a good point, because the GPS data has literally play speed, and you're running in shorts and t-shirt. That doesn't necessarily translate. All right, next up, pick 17, Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock, and I don't know why they just don't pay Trey Hendrickson. He is one of the most disruptive pass rushers in the NFL, and Steelers fans are quite familiar with watching him do his damage year in and year out. But whatever they do with him, whether they keep him or not, I think they still need to continue to bolster the edge rush position. And I went with Mike Green, the edge rusher out of Marshall. And the reality is there may be some off-field concerns with Mike, and he had addressed those at the combine. So we'll see how NFL teams feel about him. On the field, I don't think anyone plays with a higher motor over 40 to 50 to 60 snaps a game. UVA transfer. I love the fact that he's from Williamsburg, Virginia, went to the same high school as Lawrence Taylor. And he plays with an edge. And they played against Ohio State. He looked like he could go toe-to-toe with Ohio State each and every week if he needed to. So huge tape, like big time productivity on tape. We'll see how NFL teams feel about him off the field. But in terms of the way he plays football, if you're able to pair him opposite Trey Hendrickson, if you can bring Trey back, that's a problem for NFL offenses going forward. All right, you want to talk about this next young man? Oh, what do you want? You want to say something about Mike?
No, Mike was one of these. He's probably one of the most purest pass rushers in this class, with just a pure skill set of knowing how to rush the passer.
Absolutely. This next guy, this is one of my favorite players in this draft class. Pick 18, going to Seattle Seahawks, is track star, University of Houston transfer, played at Texas last year, wide receiver Matthew Golden.
The perfect X complement in Clint Kubiak's system. If you know anything about this system dating back to Coach Mike Shanahan, that X is that outside receiver with speed that can stretch the field. You got rid of DK, which that was DK's game. You got rid of Tyler Lockett. You added Cooper Kupp, but now you have a Cooper Kupp who's most likely to play the Z, which is a guy that plays over the middle. And then now you have Jackson Smith and Jigba, who will most likely be your spot. And you add a Matthew Golden on the outside, can really stretch the field and open up this offense. And, Clint Kubiak, these guys are known for having strong run games, but where their offense is most effective is when they have that passing game rolling. And man, when you get that rolling and you mix in a Kenneth Walker in the backfield, you're looking for some explosive plays in the Seattle offense.
And Matthew Golden ran a 4.29, which is faster than DK Metcalf's 40 time. So you're adding speed by losing DK Metcalf, which is crazy to think about. All right, 18 picks in the books. Going to take a quick break, come back. Pick 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock right after this. Welcome back to With the First Pick. We're doing an entire first-round mock draft. We are up to pick 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They got Baker Mayfield back. We're going to bolster that defense, Ran, with Alabama off-ball linebacker Jihad Campbell. Just turned 21. He is probably a shade behind Jalen Walker in terms of freakish athleticism in the middle of the field at the second level. I love his fit in Tampa Bay. He's going to run around with his hair on fire, sideline-to-sideline guy who's actually going to get stronger and maybe faster, which is scary to think about. That's who I had going 19 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Pick 20. Things get interesting here. And you were on the clock for the Denver Broncos. How are you helping out Bo Nix?
Like I said before, with the Indy pick, best friend to a young quarterback, is a running game and a safety valve underneath. And so to add to that running back, taking North Carolina running back Omarion Hampton here, this has probably of the exercise been my most favorite pick. May not necessarily be my most favorite player, but my most favorite pick just in terms of fit. And you look at what Sean Payton likes to do with these running backs, these style running backs. He's a three-down runner, kind of puts you in the mind of a Joe Mixon. In the way he plays, I think he probably has a little bit more straight line speed than Joe Mixon. But just thinking about a lineup where you have Jaleel McLaughlin and Omarion Hampton kind of gives Sean Payton that feel of Mark Ingram and Pierre Thomas again.
Yeah, and I think I'll ask you this. You think what percentage do you put on two running backs going in the first round?
Percentage, I'll say 75%.
Oh, okay, that's pretty high. Okay. Yeah, Hampton's a great player. And deep running back class, but he and Jeanty are special talents. All right, next up, pick 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we'll see as we talk. Aaron Rodgers remains unsigned. He's throwing passes to DK Metcalf. We'll see how that works out quarterback-wise. I'm not taking a quarterback here if I'm Pittsburgh. I'm learning my lesson from the Kenny Pickett situation a few years ago in 2020. So instead, I'm going to help out the interior of that defensive line. I'm taking Kenneth Grant. Defensive lineman out of Michigan, 330 pounds, played next to Mason Graham. He will be alongside Keanu Benton. He'll be alongside Cam Hayward as long as Cam Hayward wants to be there. And, of course, they have Alex Highsmith and T.J. Watt. They're going to bolster that defense, which down the stretch the last few years has sort of been porous, and they need to fix that in addition to the quarterback situation. But I think they can fix the quarterback situation either in the short term with Aaron Rodgers or maybe even look to next year's draft. But for now, Kenneth Grant is the guy. Pick 22. The Jim Harbaughs are up, the L.A. Chargers. And this is a recurring theme with your picks here, Ran. You're helping out a quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you know Jim Harbaugh's system, and everywhere he's been, he's had that playmaking tight end, in the system. So gave him another Michigan guy here in Colston Loveland. I think it's a really good pick for him, just in the ways that they can use him offensively in terms of the intermediate area, running up the seams, a guy that can make plays with the ball in his hands. I think he's a really good fit for Justin Herbert and that offense. And in a perfect world, you'd like to see Kenneth Grant go here with their lack of depth on the Chargers defensive line. But once again, Ryan, you stole my pick. And so we went with the safe pick here in Colston Loveland for the Chargers.
Shout out to Dallas Clark for suggesting I make that pick. We're going to hold this against you until the end of time, Rand. All right, next up, Loveland's. And by the way, for even as slender as he is for a tight end, I think he's going to get bigger. And he runs through arm tackles like he weighs about 20 pounds heavier than he does. So he's a fun pick for the Chargers there, and I think Justin Herbert would probably be pretty happy about that. Next up, pick 23, Green Bay Packers. And I'll start with this. We talked to Jackson Dart at the Combine, Rand, and he said the best cornerback he faced in the SEC was his teammate Trey Amos, which it says a lot. We haven't talked a lot about Trey in the media in terms of the pre-draft process, but I think he has every chance to be a first-round pick. He's long, he's physical, he has ball skills, he can cover at all three levels. Jair Alexander, we don't know what his future is going to be in Green Bay. They've moved on from Eric Stokes, their former first-round pick, so Trey Amos makes a ton of sense if they're looking to bolster that secondary on day one. Speaking of bolts from the secondary, pick 24, B-Flow, Brian Flores gets one of the smartest guys in this draft. You got your hat?
Going back to the hat.
All right. What's Kevin O'Connell doing? What's Kwesi doing at pick 24?
They're giving defensive coordinator Brian Flores what he needs, and that's Malachi Starks, a safety that's going to help bolster that secondary. Malachi Starks is probably one of the more smart football players, in this class, particularly in the secondary. He can get guys lined up, and he's plenty versatile. If you look at the way they use Josh Metellus, he's kind of the movable chess piece in that defense. And let's not forget, and let's not be mistaken, Harrison Smith is 36 years old, and so it's getting close to that time where it's, to move on from him. And now you have a guy like Malachi Starks to help patrol the center field of your defense moving forward.
Yeah, he ran a 4.5 during the pre-draft process. He plays faster than that. I'm not worried about any of that stuff, and I'm not getting hung up on times because we did that with Kyle Hamilton, who should have been a top 10 pick, and he's now one of the best safeties in the NFL. All right, next up, before we take a break here, pick 25, the Houston Texans. They've been moving and shaking this offseason, a lot of moving. Perhaps more than shaken. But here, I'm going to help them out. I'm going to help out C.J. Stroud. They've signed Cam Robinson to play left tackle. I'm drafting Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle at Ohio State. Now, he got banged up for the season, lost for the season in that game against Oregon back in October. Saw him at his pro day last Wednesday where he warmed up for NFL teams, and he went through some drills, and then he did some pass rush drills, and he looked pretty good for the 5 minutes we got to see him without a knee brace. He's probably not going to be ready to go right away. Are you okay taking Josh Simmons here? Because athletically, no one looks more the part than Josh Simmons, the San Diego State transfer.
No, I absolutely love the pick, and for that reason, they already have the position, somewhat solidified in the interim, and so there's no rush to get him back out there. But now you know that you have a quality starting tackle in the hopper waiting when it's time to make that transition. He was one of the more intriguing guys I watched, throughout the process. You start looking at other tackles, and you're like, wait, who is this guy? And, especially, considering he was a transfer from San Diego State, and they had another tackle on the opposite side of him in San Diego State who ended up at Florida, who I think will be an intriguing day 3 prospect as well. So love the pick here with Josh Simmons and what Houston can do moving forward at that position. Yeah,
we talked to him at the Combine, and that young man also has an edge, which you like to see in your offensive tackles. All right. We're down the home stretch, Rand. Pick 26 through 32, starting with the L.A. Rams. We'll tell you who the Rams take right after this break. All right, Rand, we have 7 picks to go in this first-round mock draft. You were on the clock at pick 26. What are the Los Angeles Rams doing?
We're taking Kentucky corner Max Hairston. If you look at the Rams secondaries, particularly on the edges, they've had a revolving door there. And so they've had a bunch of, stopgap guys, if you will, no disrespect to those guys. But getting this guy, a young guy with real speed, I think you said 4.28, a guy that can blaze. And if Matthew Golden is taking his 4.2 to Seattle, you better have somebody in LA that can run with it and cover it. And this guy can do that.
Yeah, he's a fun player, man. He was banged up with a shoulder injury, but when he's healthy, he is balling out. And very few people move like he does in and out of breaks. So he's a fun player for the Rams, certainly. Pick 27. Speaking of fun players, man, this guy is awesome. Great dude, fantastic athlete, fantastic productivity. So it all comes together. Nick Emanwori, the safety out of South Carolina. He is basically, if you want to call him an athlete in the vein of Travis Hunter, I would not argue with that, but I have him going to the Baltimore Ravens. They have Kyle Hamilton. They have Ardarius Washington playing strong safety on the depth chart here. Nick Emanwori can come in and play any position you want. Safety, he can play closer to the line of scrimmage. I mentioned the ball skills. He has a nose for the football. He is always around the ball making plays, whether it's in the pass game or in the run. and he feels like a Raven in terms of the way he approaches playing football. Next up, pick 28. The Detroit Lions are getting Aiden Hutchinson some help, and I'll be honest, Rand, this guy is probably a top 15 talent, but he lasts here to pick 28, James Pierce.
Yeah, like you said, a top 15 talent. I know there's some off-the-field concerns, and for that reason, why not Detroit? What better place to put him in Detroit, where you have an Aiden Hutchinson in the room, you have Dan Campbell as your head coach, and then you have a GM in Brad Holmes who's played defensive line, and you have a guy in the front office as well, Ray Agnew, who's been a former top 10 pick as a defensive lineman. I think they will understand a young man like this and see where his talent fits in with him. They had shortcomings on the edge last year when Aiden Hutchinson got hurt, and now you got a young, explosive guy in the room that can come off the edge and make plays opposite of Aiden. So know the off-field concerns, but I like the fit here in Detroit to help them bring him along as a man.
I agree with that 100%. Next up, pick 29, the Washington Commanders. Dan Quinn is known for his defense, and he's getting another big dude in Shamar Stewart, who could actually go higher than this. The productivity wasn't there at A&M, but he looks the part getting off the bus, and he tested through the roof, and I think his best football is ahead of him. They have Dorrance Armstrong, they have Javon Kinlaw, who they signed to play inside, and they have Cleve Farrell, the former first-round pick of the Raiders. I think Shamar Stewart would fit in right away, would not have to play until he was ready to, and I think that might be a great atmosphere for him. Pick 30, Buffalo Bills. They've been busy this offseason as well. You have them taking Walter Nolan, the twitched-up interior defensive lineman out of Ole Miss.
Can you imagine a sub-package situation where you got Ed Oliver and Walter Nolan next to each other, playing 2 wide threes, isolating guards, getting one-on-one matchups, and you could get these one-on-one matchups now because you add a Joey Bosa, to the opposite side of a Greg Rousseau. So how are you going to slide your protections? And if you know anything about a Sean McDermott's defense, it's all about attacking and being able to attack and hit gaps and get off the rock. And so Walter Nolan fits that, and I love this fit for him there because you still have Daquan Jones there, as the early down starter, opposite of Ed Oliver. So adding Walter Nolan would give them a third guy in that rotation that can wreak havoc inside.
Love it. Pick 31, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to get Chris Jones some help. Look like Chris Jones needs help. But Derek Harmon, the interior defensive lineman out of Oregon, he does everything at a high level. He's not going to blow you away play in and play out, but whatever you ask him to do, he's going to do. And I love the idea of him learning next to Chris Jones and his best football, it feels like, is in front of him as well. Finally, pick 32, the champions, Philadelphia Eagles. You have them going with twitched-up edge rusher Donovan Ezeraku. And the only thing I'll ask about this, because I had him as a top 15 talent getting after the quarterback, I have concerns about him against the run. Is that something that we can work on, get him stronger? Where are you on Donovan Ezeraku?
Yeah, I mean, those same concerns. But if you look in their defense, his initial role is going to be that of a sub rusher. And so you look at they lost Josh Sweat, they lost Brandon Graham this offseason, and you had their 2 young guys, and Jalix Hunt had a great Super Bowl, and then Nolan Smith has established himself as one of the better up-and-coming young rushers, and you add a guy like this to the fold, I think kind of completes that young transition to the edge. And because if I'm not mistaken, I think the same concerns were Josh Sweat coming out about him being a run defender, and we see where that ended up for him. So I love the fit here, and if you know anything about Howie and the way they've drafted over the years, they're going to draft up front in these earlier rounds, and I think the fit here is a good one.
That's a great point about Josh Sweat. And Nolan Smith was not necessarily considered a stretch, but his frame was a concern coming out. And to your point, Howie Roseman apparently knows what he's doing more than the media folks. Jalix Hunt was a former safety who transferred and looked overmatched at times at the Senior Bowl. And then all he did was day 3 guy who comes in and contributes and does the role that he's asked to do. All right, Rand, we hit all 32 picks. Only 2 quarterbacks, so no Jackson Dart, no Tyler Shuck, no sneaky quarterbacks into the first round. But that's it for us here with the first pick. And by the way, we're going to be at the Colorado Pro Day on Friday. So check out With the First Pick wherever you get your podcast and follow us there. Thanks for joining us.